Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Hi everyone, welcome to Nightlight. We'll be covering a little of everything Ken Quiet Hawk states in his wonderful intro as an extension of Mother's Day. We'll be delving into topics such as the differences found in twin mermaids, like the West Coast one, who is so chatty while the East Coast one quietly eats garlic rolls, Bigfoot families, marine cryptids, and right before we went live, we learned of the possible evolution of talking cats. We'll see how that one pans out later in the show. We're bringing another new voice to Nightlight Part 2 tonight. There won't be a rehash of last week's guest theory on UFOs, and we aren't going to be here like how to become the next Gandalf and lead your band of hobbits to the sunny parts of the Shire. Barbara and I are trying to continue to develop quality programming based on new books and insights to unusual aspects of life. So, that's the way we design the show. We are bringing a variety of topics each week, and we thank you for helping us to grow. Please visit Barbara's website, barbaradelong.com, to see the selection of over 600 shows, and if you like the diversity, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or the newsletter. Max Hawthorne is our guest tonight. He is the author of the Kronos Rising novel series and Memoirs of a Gym Rat. He is an amateur paleontologist, frequent radio guest, and will be starting his own Facebook live stream show soon on the Skydoor Network. He holds a world record for catching a fish, which we'll learn about in just a minute. Max's website is maxhawthorne.com. How are you?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay. We want to hear first about this world record fish. Did you catch this prize fish near Pompano Beach? What kind of fish was it? What was the size?
I actually don't get into details about the particulars of that species because the fish was kept, and it's something that I've since become opposed to, I guess you'd say. But I mean, I've caught several world record species of fish. Since that time I've released them. The nearest one in Florida would have been, at least a decade ago when I was down there in the Keys, and we were fishing, and I hooked what at first the captain was worried was going to be an enormous sawfish, which is, of course, a protected species.
Wow.
And, of great concern. Yeah, you saw this enormous orangish thing deep down. You couldn't bring it up. It was very powerful, and I wasn't using super heavy tackle. But it turned out to be the biggest nurse shark he'd ever seen, and to this day would dwarf the existing all-tackle world record. But I didn't want to kill the fish, so we cut it loose. But it was somewhere between 350 and 450 pounds. I think the record right now is only 260 something or something. But and out of Montauk, New York, that's got to be 2 decades ago, I released a blue shark that was over 12 feet long that would also still be the world record, and that fish was calculated over 700 pounds. But there's a lot of great things out there. I like to have a lot of adventures on the water, et cetera. I'm just not, I'm very conservation-minded, I guess you'd say. I've even written articles to protect species like the Goliath grouper from being overexploited and killed. So.
Okay. Well, sounds very exciting. Okay. And speaking of fishing trips, one of America's greatest novels, Moby Dick, is about the one that got away. Melville based it on actual, captain's logs and other reports from the very early 19th century. There really was an albino whale spotted in the Pacific, and there is an account of a whale sinking the Essex, which was incorporated into Moby Dick. These eyewitness accounts do make for captivating reading, but they do set a precedence. And you've seen these reports that there is an albino whale in the Atlantic. What is that? Pretty, Is that like a rarity, like the white buffalo, or?
Well, there's several different species of whales that have white versions. I don't know that they're necessarily albinos, Mark. They may be. They look to me more like leucistic, meaning that they still have pigmentation, like their eyes will be blue instead of like pink or red. But they're just a white, snowy white color. There's a famous humpback whale, I don't remember his name, to be honest, that's, quite the spokesperson, I guess you'd say, for that, quite the photo hog. But the sperm whale was originally documented in the TV show Monster Quest about 11 years ago off the Azores, and he was an infant at the time, I guess you'd say, almost a newborn, and they managed to get brief footage of him, but they had a very tough time because sperm whales live in large family units, females, adolescent males, and their offspring, not the large, dominant males typically, but and so they had this white baby that they get brief footage of, but the cows were so aggressive protecting the little one that they really couldn't get much or get near it. You get attacked by a 35 to 45 foot pissed off whale, you've got a problem on your hands. And the fact that the whale would live to maturity, I mean, it's easier, of course, when it lives in a family group where it's got protection, because being all white, it doesn't blend in with the rest of its surroundings. Sperm whales have few enemies when they're large, but a baby would be susceptible to attacks, let's say, by orcas, the kind of subspecies of orca that preys on marine mammals, other whales, etc., and who knows, maybe even some unsavory Homo sapien types. But it appears from the last photos I've seen that the whale is still alive, and I've seen some recent photos of him still in the Azores in that same area, and he's grown quite a bit in the last 11 years, and he's on his way to becoming a real-life Moby Dick, which is something to see. Yeah, I actually had like before I even knew about him, I had featured in my first novel as a part of one of the characters' backstories. She has an encounter where there's an adolescent bull, a white bull sperm whale, whose name was Avalanche, as in snowy avalanche. He was all white, and she and her team were trying to protect the whale from hunters who basically had hired like some professional people to go out there, kill this whale so they could, I guess, hang its head in their corporate office or something. And so that was part of the backstory. And then I had, of course, Avalanche made a reappearance in another novel, along with some other stuff. But anyway, not to digress. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, it's every once in a while. It seems like it's kind of a common occurrence that someone might get a photo of white or albino deer or squirrel. See it every once in a while. It's just really interesting. As we kind of get started on looking at a lot of these anomalous marine creatures, that this, we have these reports going, back to 300 years or so, and still see the same type of animal in the wild today. It's just, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, there's not, you have, like, first off, the odds of one being born white when it's not its natural protective coloring is extremely rare to begin with. And then, of course, you have the pressure factor, whether it's going to live to adulthood. If you're a squirrel and you have to worry about a hawk swooping down and getting you, it's one thing if you're a gray squirrel that blends in with gray bark. If you're a white squirrel sitting on bark, you're standing out like it's an Eat It Joe sign. So you're really going to have to be on your toes in order to make it. There is one thing when you mentioned the Essex and its encounter, because that's a true story. That ship was struck and sunk with a loss of life by a very large bull sperm whale. And in fact, I believe, and it's been a while since I read this, ages, but I believe the whale actually rammed the ship head on, and it stunned itself, and because it hit the prow of a huge wooden ship that was even bigger than it, and then it drifted sideways, so it was actually alongside the ship at one point, and the people who were on board the ship had gotten a measure of it compared to the length of the ship, and they swore on a stack of Bibles that the whale was around 85 feet long, which is an enormous sperm whale. That would be like 150 tons or something like that, like blue whale mass or something. And then, of course, the whale regained consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. He was no longer punch drunk. He came back. He broadsided the ship, caved in its flank, and the ship sank. But so the interesting thing is, though, is there are documented occurrences of sperm whales that size and pushing that size, going back early, in the 1900s and stuff, from Russian whaling records, et cetera, even, the 1920s or 30s, where they were killing and butchering and, of course, measuring bull sperm whales that were 75, 80, even 84 feet in length. And now they don't get anywhere near that size. They pass 60 feet. It's something. So we've unfortunately and sadly decimated their breeding stock, their gene pool, by killing off all the big alpha males. And I can only hope that, given time and protection, that those genes are still in there somewhere and they'll be able to come back out.
I hope so too. And since you're getting us started with some of these examples from a couple hundred years ago, there's another sighting of a. That one sounds more like a cryptid. Not has nothing to do with a whale, but there's some type of creature swimming alongside of a Carnival cruise ship. I was seen by a lot of people out the windows and on the deck and stuff. Can you tell us about that
Sure.
case?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Carnival cruise monster, a name I coined when I got to interview Mr. Paul. But Yeah, he's a UK resident, great guy, by the way. And he had, I believe the sighting, and I don't have anything in front of me, was in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And he was working.
Fairly recent.
Yeah, he was working as a fitness person on the Carnival cruise line ship. I believe it was the Breeze. And when this happened, they'd been away at sea for a couple of days now. They were in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. I think it was like late summer, like August or September, something. And he got called over. They were on the top deck by a small crowd of, passengers, and they were very excited because they saw something swimming alongside the ship. And they called him over and they said to him, can you tell us what that is? And he looked down, and swimming a couple hundred feet away from the ship. Now, keep in mind, a cruise ship is enormous. I don't know if you've ever been on one. I mean, I've gone to Disney, cruises a lot, and these things are the size of a modern-day aircraft carrier. The Carnival.
Yeah, they're big.
Yeah. So, I mean, this thing posed no threat to the ship or anything. But, these things weigh over 100,000 tons or something. It's like a small city on the move. But there was an enormous marine animal that was keeping pace with the ship, and Paul was completely unfamiliar with it. He saw it was running parallel to the ship, first off, which is interesting, which shows you it was either used to ships or unintimidated, let's put it that way. And it was also capable of considerable speed, because I researched all this stuff, and those cruise ships, they average, when they're on their way, a speed of about 20 or 21 miles an hour or something like that. So that's, a pretty good clip. That's like the speed of a cruising blue whale or something like that. I mean, they can go faster at speed, but this thing was like putting out no effort, as he put it. And he said that he could see, it was just below the surface parts of it, and he could see the head and the neck and part of the upper back, and that was basically it. So the rest of it was presumably like drooped down a little bit, and it was just kind of surfacing to get air or whatnot. And he said he was familiar. He'd seen whales and whale sharks and all sorts of sharks in his time at sea, et cetera. And he said this was none of those. It was much, much bigger. I mean, the size of a very large blue whale, let's say, but much more massive. He described it as having a head that was shaped like an enormous alligator or crocodile. It wasn't a really thin snout, but it was definitely sort of tapered, like triangular, a very thick neck. And then he described it as having what he called like traps, like these enormous things you saw under the surface, like that sort of flared out, like giant shoulders or something like that. And, we had discussed this thing at length. And, he came to the conclusion that it's quite possible that what he was seeing was pectoral fins that, this thing had spread out, to keep it on plane or whatever as it was swimming. They control their up and down, like the diving planes on a submarine. Understand?
Right.
But yeah, he said he described it in glorious detail. I mean, its skin was like black or super dark gray, possibly with some little like gray like flecks on it. The skin was smooth, kind of slippery looking. He said that he didn't see any teeth or anything like that. It was the head was so semi-submerged, and all its back just barely broke the surface. It did not blow like a whale. Like when a cetacean surfaces and there's an explosion of water vapor, et cetera. It didn't do that. He said that as the head neared the surface, all the water around the head turned like whitish, which is something more similar to what we see in turtles or crocodilians, where they release small air bubbles as they come up. Well, I guess they're more stealthy than a whale, since they're predators and they stalk things or whatnot. But of course, if an animal that size, it would, those bubbles would be magnified by 1 million or whatever. So the water turning white made perfect sense. But he said that it breathed or whatever, and then it submerged back down. It kept pace with the ship for a little bit more, and then it turned and it veered away like on a 45-degree angle. It was on their port side, if I recall, when this happened. And as it started to swim away, he actually took a photo of it. And in the next port, he was in a bar and something happened, and he lost his phone. Let's put it that way. That's the cleaned up version, I guess, or whatever. But the whatever. There was a partying going on in a bar at the next port, and his phone was lost, and we never got a photo of it. We'd actually, when I did the interview, put a thing out there if anybody, other passengers, had a photo of this thing, et cetera, because he said a couple people had their phones out. That we wanted them to come forward, et cetera. But from what his description, the part of it that he saw, which was just from its head, the tip of the snout, let's say, to maybe the upper back, was a solid 50 feet in length. And he compared that to like the lifeboats that they have, which are down below there, as you can see from the top deck. And this thing was much, much larger, the part of it that they saw, than the boats, which are, I checked, somewhere in like around 37 feet long or something like that. The big motorized lifeboats that they have. So this thing was much longer, much more massive than these boats. So he had something viable to compare it to get, an idea of the scale. It's hard to see. You see something in the water, it's hard to say like how big that is. But if you have a boat right below you and you're looking down at it, and you've seen these boats in the water for drills when they lower them and stuff like that, he was able to get an accurate estimate in terms of how big this thing was. But how big the whole thing was, who can say? It would have definitely been much, much bigger than 50 feet, though.
Okay, and where was this sighting?
It was in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay,
he said it was a day or two away from shore already, so it would have been far out in the Gulf. It wasn't near shore or anything like that.
Since 2014, is there some kind of new discovery of a deep sea type creature that
has
been found? Yes. Is there anything in the literature that can help to identify what the people on the cruise ship saw?
Well, we went through everything and anything. I threw photos at him of, beaked whales and sperm whales and, things living and dead and everything I could possibly think of. Basking sharks. You name it, I was throwing it at him. And he's like laughing. He's like, dude, I know what that is. It wasn't a squid. A squid seemed like a viable possibility at one point, because there are anecdotal reports and even non-anecdotal reports of squid reaching gigantic sizes, So, it wouldn't have surprised me if he saw a squid that size that was, pacing along, et cetera, that type of thing. But he was absolutely adamant that it was not that. We couldn't find anything, any extant species that came anywhere near it. And you got to keep in mind, the size of the thing is a real factor also. It had skin like a leatherback sea turtle. It was the best description, like dark and smooth, that type of stuff. It was definitely a marine animal. He said it looked reptilian to him, but we couldn't find anything. The closest we could come up with, and I drew like a profile of one being seen from the top, just like a shadowy thing in the water. And he said, "That's it." And what I drew was an interpretation of a Mosquitoes hoffmanni or something swimming in the water and just barely coming up for air and barely submerged. So, based on his description, and he and I seem to agree, he feels like it may well have been an enormous extant mosasaur that was cruising in the Gulf of Mexico. And keep in mind, there have been many, many sightings of this type of thing. His is like one of the biggest I've heard of in terms of mass and stuff. But around New Zealand, there's dozens of them, all that whole area. It seems like a hot spot for this type of thing. I could rattle off listings for you of sightings and stuff, but that sounds like an adult, territorial male or whatever in its prime, like a species maximum. He said this thing had no fear of anything, and it was very laid back. It wasn't worried about anything. He said it looked like a submarine when it surfaced, the water streaming off its back. It was that big, et cetera. And he said nothing could stand up to this thing. Oh, there was one other interesting point that he touched on also, which was that at that same time period, out of Sanibel Island, there were two sightings, one of which there's a video of and one is definitely somebody I spoke to, but like this couple in Sanibel Island there, they filmed something grabbing a manatee, and there's video footage of this. And they said that it was about the size of a bus. It went under their boat, and then it grabbed a manatee and it wrapped it up, pulled it under. And I believe it was an enormous octopus. And my belief is strengthened by this book because of the fact that a guy I know that I spoke to and interviewed about this, he was off Sanibel like the next day or something, or a day or two later when this happened, and he was on a 55-foot fishing boat that they chartered, and they were sitting there, and when he told me this, by the way, he thought that this was normal. Just to give you an idea, like when I told him, no, that's not normal, he was quite surprised. But he described that him and his friend were sitting there, and keep in mind, it's a smelly fishing boat, sitting there just drift fishing, and a tentacle comes up, breaks the surface, and 30 feet of the tentacle comes out of the water on the surface, not up, but on the surface, snakes toward them, and starts to touch the sides of their boat. He said the tentacle was definitely from an octopus, the skin, he could see the suckers, etc. He said it ranged from 2 to 3 feet in thickness as it went further back. And it was like carefully just touching their boat, and then it withdrew, went back under, and then it was gone. They were only 20 feet away from this thing when this happened, looking down at it. And he thought that this was normal. Oh, that's what an octopus looks like. And I'm like, no, that's not what an octopus looks like. You only saw part of a tentacle. You didn't see the body, the rest of the tentacle, et cetera. And a 3-foot thick tentacle is indicative of an enormous animal. And that's not as thick as it got, because they didn't see the body. I mean, this thing just lifted up an arm and just, explored it. And I explained to him that the reason that this happened, and I've written books with the Kraken in there. My Kraken has been an enormous octopus. When you write novels, you want realism. You want to achieve that suspension of disbelief for your readers so that when they read it, they feel like this is a real living creature, that they're in the moment, and it could happen, okay? So I do extensive research. And octopuses, same thing, they have what are called chemoreceptors in their suckers, the suction cups, we'll call them, on their arms.
Right.
And those taste things, see? So this creature was tasting the boat when it came out there, when it touched it, et cetera.
Okay.
And it must have smelled, that maybe they're putting chum in the water, they're fishing, there's fish blood, et cetera. He's looking for a meal. And a cephalopod that size would undoubtedly be able to prey on a whale. So I think it looked at this boat, the shape sitting there, and it's like, oh, is this a sleep whale, a drifting whale, or better yet, a whale carcass, in which case it would have wrapped it up and started trying to feed. But after it tasted the hull and it was like, oh, this is metal or fiberglass or whatever it was, it changed its mind and it withdrew. So they were actually very lucky because that animal could have been 70, 80 feet long, maybe more. I mean, include the mantle, the rest of the arms, et cetera. And if it attacked the boat and came in contact with a person, who's to say it's not like, oh, well, here's an hors d'oeuvre at least. Let me just have this, et cetera. But I think this is the same animal that fed on that manatee in Sanibel Island. They were actually outside of Sanibel, where their boat was, my friend. So, and he said when they called the Coast Guard and they reported it, the guy was like, yeah, he goes, we just had a report like that yesterday or something, So it was either the same animal or more than one that migrates into that area. I personally believe that they go there to feed on manatees. They're looking for a large, nutrient-rich, defenseless meal. And that's what a manatee is. It's just basically like a pork roll, It can't fight. It can't defend itself. It's not fast, or anything like that. If you look at all the listings of sightings in Hawaii of giant octopi, they all happen around the time when the green turtles are coming ashore to lay their eggs. And a green turtle could weigh 500-600 pounds. It's a nice, slow chunk of meat for a giant octopus. They chew through the shell, the carapace, the plastron, whatever. It's like great. So this sounds like even larger octopi. They would want a nice big meal, and migrating manatee would make a perfect, snack or something like that. So anyway, so my point of this, I'm sorry, I digress, was that Paul was wondering if perhaps this thing was migrating that way because he said he felt like it was headed back toward shore, and if it was itself tracking the octopuses because maybe they were what it feeds on. See? Kind of like a King Kong versus Godzilla scenario.
Oh, it's very interesting. I'll come back to the manatee in a little bit. I do have a question about them, but it just presents some interesting information to ponder. And a few years ago, there was like a Travel Channel or History Channel show on Josh Gate. It was like one of those types of show, monster. I think you mentioned Monster Quest.
Mm-hmm.
But they were investigating the report of a megalodon in the Gulf of Mexico. They never found anything. They interviewed the local fishermen along the Mexican coast who said they saw something that they've never seen. It was huge. I don't know if you've seen the episode I'm talking about. I do forget the exact show title. I'm sorry about that. But
okay.
but is there the possibility of a few surviving megalodons to go along with the example you just gave? It something really big that ate a manatee, and the animals swimming alongside of the Carnival cruise ship. Is the Gulf of Mexico?
There was one in the Sea of Cortez that I know on Monster Quest where they were investigating. I don't know if that was for the monster squid part or not. And I know they were investigating like sightings of like a huge shark they called like the Black Devil or something like that, or Black Demon.
That may have been. You may have narrowed it down for me. That sounds about right. I just want is that a megalodon surviving today? Is that a real possibility?
Well, so first, it's my considered opinion that there are some large macropredatory sharks out there, and we have a lot of evidence that backs that up. When I say evidence, we don't have like skeletal remains, a carcass, or teeth yet, but we have, and I'm not talking anecdotal reports, but we have bite marks which are extremely compelling. I'll start off with the smaller end of things, and then I'll work up from there. There are, I don't have the guy's name in front of me, but he did research for some marine biologists, and he went out and he got photographic evidence and measured the bite marks of great white sharks, for example, on whale carcasses. And they were able to take these legitimately obtained bite marks and compare them to the bite radiuses on physical specimens of, obviously caught and killed great white sharks to compare them, how big they were, et cetera. And based on that factor, he was able to say, and marine biologists will back this largely, that the great white shark definitely exceeds 8 meters in length, which is 25 feet, somewhere in 25 to 26 feet, based on what this particular researcher did. Okay, a friend of mine, and he and I are talking about actually going out and trying to fish for this thing at some point. We're putting it in, the information in like a documentary, et cetera. But he's had like whale carcasses that he studied, and we have actual video footage of this. So it's not just photos even. It's him approaching a stinking whale carcass, that came ashore, and pulling out a measuring tape on video and taking measurements, et cetera, while being filmed. And there are multiple bites, huge sections of the carcass are missing. And he got bite measurements that I crunched the numbers. And just for example, most great white sharks, the tooth enamel, the actual enamel portion of the tooth, the crown, okay, the triangular part that's not embedded in the jaw, they get to be 2 inches, maybe a little bit more in length, okay, the long way. He was finding the actual tooth measurements, the diameter was over 2 inches for each puncture where the teeth had dug in. And he measured the bite marks, and they were enormous. The sharks, and it was presumably a great white, was in the 28 to 29 foot range. And that's conservative based on known, measurements, et cetera. So that basically proves that a great white or something similar can be pushing 30 feet in length. So that we have that, okay? Then there's a famous photo that the guys who've been researching the super predator, I'm sure you've seen those shows, the documentaries, Hunt for the Super Predator, whatever, this type of stuff. And the most recent one they did, they were theorizing that an enormous shark is responsible for killing and eating shark alpha. Do you remember that story where a 3-meter great white was swallowed by something and it had a tag on it?
Yes, something like that. I vaguely remember that.
Okay, so that was like a decade ago or something off Australia in the Bremer Canyon. And so they did this documentary theorizing that a much larger shark was responsible for this, et cetera. Okay, I disagree with their findings completely based on the temperatures of the tag, et cetera, and all the other factors that went with it, without getting into a whole big thing. But, the animal's digestive system took a super long time, 8 days. After it consumed the shark, it stayed at or near the surface, for the next 8 days until it excreted the shark, or what was left, okay, and after it swallowed it. All this stuff, and the body temperature all seems to indicate a marine reptile. And the marine reptile that has that exact temperature range is something like a leatherback sea turtle. And there are reports that I've been one I investigated and pretty much proved what the guy said based on his old footage, that there is a species of piscivorous turtle out there. Piscivorous means fish eating, so it's not like one of these sea turtles that eats jellyfish or algae all the time. But that is like at least 38 feet long, possibly bigger. It's a carnivorous turtle. It has a leatherback type body, but possibly no shell or a slim shell, and it's a fast swimming predator. Now, a 38-foot turtle is big enough to eat a 9-foot shark with no problem. Of course, the guys from that show didn't seem very appreciative. I got this nasty email or whatever a while back. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, okay? Maybe it was a fan of theirs, But so my point is that on the show, they had photos of a pygmy blue whale that had been attacked somewhere. I don't remember where. It wasn't near the Bremer Canyon. But it has on its peduncle, the area near the tail, it has a bite scar there that's a good 4 feet across on the top of it there, where a shark, and if you see the detailed photo, you could see scarred individual teeth even. So a shark with a bite radius of at least 4 feet across had attacked this near 70-foot whale and tried to cripple it by destroying its means of propulsion. Tried to bite through its tail region, crush the spine. The whale would have been unable to swim and either bled out or been so crippled it couldn't swim and defend itself, and it would have been easy to kill. So but the bite didn't do enough damage. The whale survived, et cetera. It's interesting because people said, oh, well, the bite, stretches over time and all this other stuff like that. And we're not talking scars on the skin. We're talking a hunk of flesh that's been excised that still has tooth grooves. I don't believe that bite, that bite mark enlarged on the whale's body. If anything, it would fill in, not stretch, if you know what I'm saying. But we have more proof because a marine biologist I know in 2017, which is much more recently, was swimming with a 40-foot whale shark, and he has photos of it, which I have also. And the whale shark was sporting a bite mark, a similar bite on its left caudal keel toward the back. The caudal keel is like this elongated ridge that runs along the sides of the tail. And there's a 4-foot chunk of it that's been bitten through. Now, whale sharks are very slow animals. They don't, it's a sad thing, but their sheer size and having a skeleton made of cartilage makes them slow. They can't swim faster because their muscles, their body just can't move that much mass back and forth. The cartilage will not hold up under that much pressure. Does that make sense? Like it's rubber.
Yeah.
Like a bones made of tire rubber are not as strong as bones made of bone. Okay. You could take a whale shark vertebrae, and you can slice it with a knife with no problem. If you had a whale vertebrae, you'd be like, you need like a saw. You understand? So the whale shark only gets to swim at like 3, 4, maybe 5 miles an hour at most, even when attacked by orcas or anything else. But it has this thickened caudal keel, like rigid, like fibrous tissue that runs out. And in my opinion, I push out a theory there that I believe this is like a crumple zone in a car for the whale. When a big shark tries to kill one of these things, he tries the same thing he did with that pygmy blue whale. They want to destroy its means of propulsion and stop it from being able to swim. So he took a shot at the whale shark and took a big crunch out of there, but he didn't get to the muscle tissue. All that stuff is just fibrous, like almost like scar tissue, that caudal keel. So the whale shark swam away. Its attacker got a mouthful of what tasted like yuck, whatever, and so forth. I personally don't think a 40-foot shark, even a predatory one, is going to be able to swim much faster than that for the same reason. So anyway, the point is though, this shark has a 4-foot bite taken out of it. Now, once again, detractors say, the bite stretches over time. But that's not true. I researched it. And I've got photos of whale sharks that have been smaller ones, like 16-footers and stuff, that were attacked by like a great white or tiger shark. And you see the bite. You can see it's very distinctive. And then you see the bite like a month or 2 later, 3 months later, and it's almost completely gone. It's all filled in. You can barely tell the shape anymore. These animals are hyper-regenerative when it comes to these type of attacks. But this bite on the 40-foot female, when I get the close-up shot of it, you can see individual tooth marks of the bite, triangles, sharp. They gouge right in there. 1, 2, 3. You can draw them. Okay, this bite is not months old. It's like a week old, 2 weeks old at most. This is not something that happened years ago, and it didn't grow with the whale shark, etc. So this is compelling evidence that there's a shark out there with a bite radius of at least 4 feet, and that puts us into an animal about the size of the whale shark, about 40 feet long. So when you ask me if it's a megalodon or not, the teeth marks are very pointy. And a megalodon's maxillary teeth, the teeth in the upper jaw, the center ones, etc., they're more rounded. They're designed to kind of fit between bones like whale ribs and like sort of crack them apart to get at the juicy stuff inside. And this thing has teeth more like a great white shark. They stay triangular, bam, like daggers, okay? So it's either what the guys from the Super Predator series theorize, like a mutant great white, some abnormally large one, or another contender would be a relative of the megalodon shark, which is Cercaricles chubutensis. And that animal existed at the same time as megalodon. They sort of like split off, etc., and it became extinct. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Probably theoretically a few million years ago or something. But and it wasn't as big. It got to be around 40 feet in length, but its upper central maxillary teeth are more triangular. They stay sort of pointy. I know I have one, a huge one, almost 5 inches in my collection. So, if I was going to say it was an extinct, quote, shark, my bet would be not as much megalodon, but its relative, chubutensis, would be a candidate. Either that, a gigantic great white, or something we just haven't seen yet. I'm sorry.
Max, with the example you just gave us, you also may find examples in the fossil records of fight to the like both animals kill each other and they just kind of die in the swamp, and a million years later they get a backhoe unearths them or something like that. Where do you get your ideas for your Kronos Rising series?
Well, I happen to have one of these. Well, my original career was as an animator. I used to draw cartoons for a living. believe it or not. I graduated from college with a degree in film and animation, and I worked in that industry for a bit, et cetera. So I tend to be artistic by nature. And that helps with your writing when you're creating compelling visuals, because you can actually, instead of putting pen to paper in terms of like artwork, et cetera, you put words to paper and use the descriptive portion of your brain to create those visuals for the reader through the words. So that is where some of the creativity comes from. But my brain just cranks out stuff nonstop. I mean, Mark, I woke up in the middle of the night last night with 2 great ideas for like 2 horror novellas. And I just texted myself messages and stuff about both of them so I wouldn't forget, because I do sometimes, I'll never remember in the morning, and I go back to sleep. And I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, man, that's a great idea, and then I can run with it. It's like I actually will, in my sleep, like if I'm in the middle of a book writing intense stuff, I'll have scene ideas and dialogue that come to me in my sleep. And I'll wake up and I'll jot down notes or whatever, or text myself, and I'll go back to sleep. Doesn't make for a lot of sleep sometimes, but I never have a problem in terms of creativity. My brain is always churning out ideas. I have a backlog of at least 20 or 25 novels, these great ideas to write, et cetera. It's just I have to whittle through that list. Writing books takes time. So I don't get writer's block. Let's put it that way. I get writer's insomnia. That's worse.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm with you on the writer's insomnia, but it's your novels are also set in the Gulf of Mexico area, where everything ended for the dinosaurs. Do you think like the Gulf of Mexico is kind of like the cryptid capital?
You mean like the cradle of where these things are all coming from, so to speak?
Yeah.
Well,
is there like a little bit higher concentration of marine cryptids there than I don't know?
I don't know. I mean, I chose Florida as my setting because I'm down there a lot. I do a lot of fishing and stuff. A lot of vacationing, et cetera. So I know the area, the climate. It's really easy to put into the book, and it's conducive for when you're writing about prehistoric marine reptiles being alive in the present. In terms of the setting you're talking about, like when I created the whole thing for Kronos Rising, I wanted something very believable to give the public so that they would actually look at the ocean after they read my book and be like, I don't want to go out there. This could be real, and people disappear here. I don't want to go out there. This type of stuff. So I was thinking, well, so much stuff's been done. I mean, you've had movies where there were 500-foot tall praying mantises frozen in an iceberg that melted. And giant dinosaurs that were frozen and came back to life, or creatures that like the Megalodon shark. There was a book called Megalodon by Dan Brown back in 1980 or something like that, and he had these huge sharks living in the bottom of the ocean, isolated, et cetera. There's been a lot of stuff. You have the plateau thing from the Lost World, and obviously now we have Jurassic Park, but things being cloned from mosquitoes that have dinosaur blood in them. You want something that seems real and natural. I think, to me, I was probably inspired by the Wollemi pines, these Jurassic era trees that still exist in parts of the world. I don't know if it's Australia or somewhere. It's been so long, decades, but where they were living in a hidden valley that was protected in terms of climate by certain factors. I don't know if it was geothermal or what, but they have these species of trees that have been around since the Jurassic period. So what I did was I decided, okay, well, how am I going to put all this together? And when you say the Gulf of Mexico, what I wanted to do is I wanted to feed off of the Chicxulub crater at the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and the asteroid impact that wiped out all the non-avian saurians, unfortunately, that we all know and love. So, I'm dealing with marine animals, though, so that makes it a little trickier. So when you have this asteroid that struck, there's different I mean, the size estimates of this asteroid have changed over the years. It was 6 miles, it was 7. Now they say maybe 9 miles in diameter. The crater has changed in sizes. I've heard it range from, 130 to 190 miles across the original crater. I mean, all different stuff. But the bottom line is, it was hell on Earth when it hit. It was a bad day to be on the planet. And one of the side effects, as it plowed into the planet and created this giant crater, et cetera, where it caused mega tsunamis that were, some estimates, 1,000 meters tall, well over 3,000 feet. That's a big wave, okay? So to help this thing out, I created this fictional island, this caldera, which in the present day is called Diablo Caldera for obvious reasons. And I had where these pliosaurs, these giant marine reptiles, are in my book. They were in the middle of a mating chase, to make it more realistic, where this female that was in estrus was being courted by a bunch of males that had to prove themselves worthy to mate, and they would be chasing her around and stuff until there was only one left. And I had, when the asteroid struck, which interrupted obviously this, it was whatever, many, many miles away, 1,000 miles away or whatever it was, these animals eventually get swept up in this enormous tsunami, which swamps this caldera. A caldera is, for those who aren't familiar with it, is like a volcano that many eons earlier has blown up, and the entire top 3/4 of it is gone. So instead of like a cone like that, it's just like a bowl-shaped depression, see? So when I had this tsunami, this mega tsunami swamp the caldera, keep going, it basically filled it with salt water and turned it into a giant saltwater aquarium. And the death toll would have been substantial, but there were surviving animals inside the caldera. Some of my pliosaurs, other marine reptiles, prehistoric fish, prehistoric squid, an entire ecosystem. You got to give these things something to eat, right? So, that's how I basically set it up. And of course, you have geothermal heating from a dormant volcano, so ice ages, et cetera, were workable. Fast forward to the present, ongoing tremors, a little split in the side, some stuff gets out, yada, yada, yada. That's where we're at. I know I digress quite a bit there, but when you asked about the whole cradle thing and, the Gulf of Mexico, so I don't know that I feel that the Gulf of Mexico is necessarily a hot spot. I think it is a hot spot in terms of, like, you've got a lot of stuff there. It's big, it's deep, and but 65 million years is a long time for things to stay in one spot. But, there's a few spots, like Australia, New Zealand, et cetera, where you've got repeated sightings, including the thing we were talking about with the monster squid from the Monster Quest thing. Oh my God, I mentioned it before, now I can't think of it. My poor brain. You doctors and your medicines. But anyway, so there's the Sea of Cortez. I'm sorry. So I would say it's a hot spot, but there's many throughout the planet, when it comes to this type of thing. So.
Okay. Well,
I would not want to be swimming down there, let's put it this way, and encounter an octopus that's big enough to eat manatees as an hors d'oeuvre.
Yeah.
That would be a horrible, horrible death. I mean, horrible.
I'm sure it would be.
Yeah, you'd be alive through a good chunk of it,
And your discussion you just gave us, you did mention in Jurassic Park they're talking about extracting DNA from mosquitoes. Is that Jurassic Park technology something that would work today? Is it here?
Well, if you had blood from a mosquito, dinosaur blood, okay, and it wasn't, dried out and deteriorated. I mean, I think they say DNA can only last so long, and I think 65, 66 million years is quite a stretch. And some of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park come from the Jurassic, which is even more, But I don't know. I don't know what the leading tech is. I would imagine if they had actual blood, that was viable with DNA in there, that they could get complete DNA strands, and knowing that we're able to reverse engineer chicken embryos and give them dinosaur characteristics already. They've done this, right? They've taken, hatched chicken eggs that have had teeth and tails and all this stuff. They're playing with the markers there. So I would imagine if they had the actual DNA, they could take an ostrich egg and use that as a surrogate, and they could, boom, put it in there. Could happen. Would it be smart? I don't know. I'd love to see a living, Rex. I don't know that I'd want to be chased by one. Especially now with Jeff Goldblum in the back, going on and on. He's so annoying. Oh, my God. Not him, but his character, God.
Yeah, I'd really like to ride around through Jurassic Park in the Jeep. I like to do that too. I'm sure most of the listeners would.
Faster, must go faster. Yeah. It's like get off the gear shift.
And on your website, you have some blogs on there. You're covering the Spinosaurus and like what you had to say about. I maybe should describe it and the little fin things and their purpose and that seems like it's a kind of a new dinosaur, at least for me. Then I have a follow-up question. But you had some neat drawings on computer graphics.
Mm-hmm.
Just if you want to talk about it, go ahead.
Are you asking me? You want me to expound upon it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
I wasn't
just
sure.
A little description of it, and then I've question afterwards.
Okay. Well, Spinosaurus has been around for a long time. I mean, the original fossils, if I'm not mistaken, were Stromer found them, were destroyed during World War II during bombings, if I'm not mistaken, which is a crying shame. A lot of fossils were lost that way. War is a terrible thing. But so Spinosaurus has gone through numerous metamorphoses over the decades. It was a quadruped. It was bipedal. It was this. It was that. You saw it in Jurassic Park 3, where it was this. They wanted to upscale the T-Rex with something bigger and badder, et cetera. But we know now and found that after that the animal was not bipedal per se. It had actually its hind legs were short. It was more like a quadruped, almost like a crocodile with this fin on its back, and we found out recently things like, well, for example, its snout was very long and narrow. It was a piscivore. It fed on fish predominantly. And most recently, which put to rest a lot of theories that people put out, like, it couldn't swim, it would have flip-flopped on the surface and stuff like that. Sometimes I hear these things and I'm like, and you know this because what? Oh, because your computer program said that? Yeah, computer programs, they're not dinosaurs. But most recently they got a complete tail, or relatively complete tail, and they know now that the animal had this long, elongated tail that was tall and narrow like a crocodile's tail or a newt's. It was designed with this sort of almost like a membrane, and it was designed to whip back and forth, in an S pattern through the water and propel it. So the animal was predominantly aquatic, sort of like a crocodile or a gharial, but with the fin, and except its legs were a bit longer, and it could probably travel better on dry land and could possibly, I believe it could rear up, stand up on its hind legs a bit also. So, but Ibrahim and the rest of his team who put out the paper and the previous papers that have solved all these mysteries are gods, in my opinion. I mean, they really, the work, the details, it's just incredible what they've done. They've breathed life, new life back into this thing. And even though people that are the fans of the mythical, Spino from JP3, were up in arms, et cetera, it's a beautiful animal. It is streamlined and sleek, and it is just the greatest fisherman in the history of the world. Certainly the biggest. 50 feet long. But I've been followed all this stuff and whatnot, and in fact, somebody just had me on a show 2 days ago for an hour talking about Spinosaurus and all this, and he didn't know that I had all this stuff up my sleeve about my own research I'd done, so I snuck it in there, and everything. Kind of like, I don't think I hogged the show, but it was nice to have new material to talk about that wasn't out there yet, And one of the things that, for me about Spinosaurus was I'm like, well, this animal was around for a long time, and it, presumably died off when its environments changed and the seas came in and it lost all its riverine environments, et cetera. But how was it surviving when you consider the fact that it had other animals that it had to contend with? First off, it shared the same bodies of water with the supercroc, Sarcosuchus imperator, which has changed in size over the years, but current estimates put the animal I think around 33 feet or something like that, 4 or 5 tons, I forget. But it was a big croc, okay, and they would have possibly competed for the same food sources. And then you had on dry land, you had Carcharodontosaurus, Saharicus, and possibly another species, and this is what they call the African T-Rex. And this was an enormous bipedal carnivore, a terrestrial killer, the size of the biggest T-Rexes known. It had a skull that was 5.2 feet long, serrated teeth, massive jaws, tremendously muscular. I mean, 8-9 tons, whatever it was. It was a killing machine. And this thing is designed to drag down ceratopsians and sauropods. Ceratopsians are horned dinosaurs, and sauropods are the big ones with the long necks and all that, in case anybody doesn't know. So point is Spinosaurus, with that long, comparatively slender snout, is not designed to slug it out with this thing, Carcharodontosaurus. That's like a gharial. Do you know what a gharial is? The crocodile, crocodilians. They have that real long, slender nose.
Alligator with the really long skinny nose.
Right, with all the teeth designed to catch fish. So a gharial does not fight with a Nile crocodile or a saltwater crocodile or an alligator. It's going to get killed. It's like somebody with a fencing foil fencing with somebody with a broadsword. You're not going to do very well. You might stick them once or twice, but you're not going to boom and it's over. So. I'm like, well, this, Spino cannot stay in the water all the time. It's presumably warm-blooded like most dinosaurs were, et cetera. It's got to come out. It's got to lay its eggs. It might nest, whatever it is. What happens when one of these Carcharodontosauruses comes down to the lake, to the river? And it's going to happen. It's got to drink, right? So, these confrontations might have been regular. And so I wanted to theorize, put out there, well, how could this, quadrupedal fish eater survive faced with effectively a Tyrannosaurus Rex coming after it, And then we went through all different variants on this. I mean, obviously the first option is, retreat. You're at the water's edge. You got 8 or 9 tons of hungry, mouth coming at you like Pac-Man with fangs. You dive in the water and you swim away. Okay. Yeah, seriously. I mean, that works, with all the crocs and everything else in there, and the advantage being for the marine animal now, the lake animal, whatever, river, it's not going to be pursued, most likely, by this thing, see? And who knows what else is in there. I mean, there could be things that we don't even know yet, But then the other option would be, bluffing. It's likely, even though its hind legs are relatively short, that Spinosaurus could rear up on its hind legs. And you see confrontations like spectacled bears being attacked by tigers. They stand up on their hind legs to try and look bigger and more intimidating, I've got video footage on my site of a giant anteater being attacked by a jaguar, this type of thing, et cetera. So they stand up like that. And Spino could certainly, in my opinion, have done that. It would have used that big, powerful, flexible tail for a tripod to help balance it, et cetera. And it would have been big, standing up as 2 stories high, hissing, whatever, puffing out the big sail, maybe turned sideways, et cetera. It might have looked so menacing that Carcharodontosaurus was like, whoa, easy, dude, I'm good, just passing through, just need a drink, this type of thing. But if not, the animal's got to defend itself. And you can bet that happened. And when you look at the hands of Spinosaurus, you see, in my opinion, how that worked, because it's got these talons on its forelimbs. And these hands couldn't turn palm down, okay, to the ground. We know the theropods, based on anatomy and the fossil record, they couldn't do that. They couldn't pronate, is what it's called. But they would be standing, the palms would be like vertical, up and down, like facing each other, et cetera. So there are these large talons on these hands, and the top one, the first digit, thumb, whatever you want to call it, is extremely large. It's twice the size of the others, long, curved, and sharp. Now, you see in the fossil record a lot of dinosaurs that have these adaptations. You've got Iguanodon, which is an herbivore that had these thumb spikes. You got Therizinosaurus that had like the long Freddy Krueger claws on its, fingers and stuff. Different ones. Okay, so Spinosaurus and its relative Suchomimus, which is a spinosaurid relative, but with longer hind legs and a shorter sail, but also a piscivore with that long thin face. They both have these matching claws and this enlarged first talon. Okay, so in my opinion, I think that this was used for self-defense. And where Spinosaurus would be in a position where it's being attacked, it would be rearing back and obviously trying to protect its vulnerable head and neck, et cetera, and it would slash with these talons. And it's got two of them. Okay, so Carcharodontosaurus is coming in, and he wants to kill this thing right away. He wants to get it by the nape of the neck, crush that spinal column, get it by the head, kill the brain cavity, whatever it's going to be. That's what he wants to do, because he knows this thing can bite back, and getting bitten is never a good thing. Like if every time you make a kill, somebody tears open your face, it's just a matter of time before you're blind, among other things. Are you with me?
Right.
So
yeah.
So now your Carcharodontosaurus, when you're going for that bite, you're using your face, see? And the Spinosaurus's arms, even though they're not gigantic, they're out there, and they're going to impact on that face before it gets to the body of the Spinosaurus. So it's slashing, wham, wham, like a giant anteater defending itself against a jaguar. Slash, slash. And a couple of hits like that is enough to tell somebody, okay, you know what? I'm good. I thought you were somebody else. I really apologize. My brother's cousin sister said you said something about my cat, and but that's actually somebody else. All right, maybe that's a little digressing. But anyway, so the point is, though, I think that's how the dinosaur protected itself. It would slash away at the faces, the heads of whatever was attacking it, et cetera, and, until it could escape or until it drove off its attacker. Hello?
No, I'm just listening to your
spiel.
Captivating information. One of the things I learned by reading the blog on the Spinosaurus is you're talking about like the little sail thing on its back. May have been like some kind of nutrient storage area. Holds a little water when he's kind of making his way across the land from one swamp to the other, and it's like it actually kind of sounds like a camel, or today's camel, and I was trying to think of some kind of like evolutionary type question to work in. If your theory is correct, well, okay, that concept of having a built-in water
reservoir
supply, a reservoir. It started millions of years ago, and it's still going on today.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get the coelacanths that haven't changed, like they've like been outside of evolution. So you get like some species have been impacted by evolution, and others have been unaffected.
I understand what you're
really,
saying.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. It's like everyone's affected by gravity, but not all the species are affected by evolution.
Well, there are. I mean, I think that if nature has, a body type that works, evolution, it sticks with it. I mean, sharks have been relatively unchanged in terms of their basic body plan for God knows how many millions of years. The same thing with crocodilians. They outlasted the dinosaurs also. So, when you have a perfected body plan, barring some cosmic interference, meaning asteroid or whatever the case may be, that plan tends to continue. Coelacanths, I mean the enormous coelacanths that lived at the time of Spinosaurus, like Mawsonia, that were the size of a great white shark. I mean, they were big. Picture like a 16, 17-foot grouper with like lobe fins. But they're gone as far as we know. We only have the normal size, like man-sized coelacanths nowadays. But in terms of the sail, I had an illustration of a camel on there for a reason, because you do start to see those extended neural spines that, in my opinion, form the sail, which is more like a hump, in my opinion. But I'm not the one who came up with that. There are paleontologists who are credited in the blog post for putting out these theories in terms of assorted aspects of it. But I believe that the spines are the actual neural spines they're thick, these bones, they're very sturdy, like a camel's but bigger. And Suchomimus, the Spinosaurus' relative, has them, but they're about half the size. Okay, so if you have this thing as a storage thing of fat, which is what a camel does. People think that a camel's hump is made out of water, and it's not. It's made out of fat. But fat is 80% or whatever it is water. See, so in times of feast or famine, in times of famine or drought, the camel is able to dissolve its own hump. And as it does, that fat gives it water, so it's able to survive for prolonged periods of time in between drinks. Okay, so Spinosaurus had the same adaptation. It would make sense, because if you think about it, it's quite possible that, like in Africa today, you have your wet seasons and your dry seasons. See, so when the dry season comes, a lot of animals die. Hippos, crocs. Crocs try and burrow into the mud, or they get under an embankment where there's mud and they bury themselves in mud, and they just sort of wait it out, live off their fat reserves and just try and chill. Okay, Spinosaurus is not a crocodile, so its metabolism is going to be different. See, it can't function at the same level as a croc. Also pretty hard to bury yourself in the embankment if you're 50 feet long, etc. But it's quite possible that huge hump was what would carry it through during these dry spells, or that would enable it to travel, to migrate to bodies of water that were unaffected by a dry season. And it would use that hump, that spine of, storages of fat, etc., to get there, like gas in your car. And that kind of makes sense if you look at Suchomimus, which has a similar adaptation, but smaller one, because Suchomimus is bipedal. It travels on two legs, and it would be faster. So it would be able to travel, longer distances in the same period of time, because it's moving at a quicker gait. It's not plodding along on all fours, boom, 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 boom. It could be jogging, loping, whatever you want to call it, etc. So logically, it makes sense that you had these adaptations, that the spines, the sail, etc., was for that main purpose. I had also put out the possibility when I was doing that other interview where another possible benefit, sometimes things work out more than once, would be that with it being a warm-blooded animal, assumedly, presumably, like most dinosaurs are known to have been, when it's in the water for prolonged periods of time, it's going to start to lose body heat. And, crocodiles, they regulate their temperatures by coming out of the water and basking, etc. But if Spinosaurus was going to be in there for prolonged periods of time, it might have been beneficial for the dinosaur to have that sail projecting up above the surface. And if that sail was dark in color, the pigmentation, or was able to change hues as need be, which would be logical, like chameleons, etc. It could turn dark brown or gray, or even black in the sun. It would heat up, and the blood rushing through that sail would circulate through the submerged portions of the animal's body, and help it stay comfortably submerged for prolonged periods of time. And that would work out very nicely for the dinosaur. So it would have a dual benefit, from the same storage of fat, etc. In my humble opinion.
And actually, I've been talking about huge animal, 50 feet long. It's going to be tough to bury himself in a swamp during the dry season, and his sail.
And you got to don't forget also. I'm sorry to interrupt, but if the thing does have to migrate to another body of water, it's now out of the water. It's more vulnerable to attack from a big predator like Ceratosaurus as well. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah. So it gives a lot of things to think about, and if the swamp dries up too much, he's going to have to get out and get out of the mud and actually find the ocean or next closest body of water. But you also cover. There's the inland sea in Russia that you mentioned, and in Adrienne Mayor's Fossil Legends of the First Americans. She talks about these mosasaurs being found in like Nebraska, Oklahoma, and kind of like that heartland plains region of the states. Have you been to some of these areas that were once the inland oceans? What are some of the other information of about these dinosaurs that we've learned just recently?
It's a lot of questions, so I'm not sure which one to address first, but the piece you're talking about with Russia, etc., is not a mosasaur per se. They're both marine reptiles, but it's a species, a genus of pliosaur, which is they came before the mosasaurs. The mosasaurs sort of emerged to fill the ecological niche as they were on their way out. So mosasaurs are basically like marine monitor lizards. They got gigantic, obviously we know. I mean, if the Carnival cruise monster is wanted, they're pretty big now. But so pliosaurs were like a type of plesiosaur that had a large crocodile-like head, a short neck, a muscular body, 4 large paddles or flippers to propel them through the water, and a short tail. So sort of like a sea turtle with 4 big flippers without the shell and a crocodile head on the end, something like that. Okay, or a short-tailed crocodile with 4 flippers, propelling it. Mosasaurs used their tail, their caudal flukes. They had like a shark tail on the end of their long tail that propelled them through the water. So it was their mode of locomotion was different too. But so the pliosaurs were different. The fossil I had in my collection, which was an intriguing, story behind it. I got it from this dealer, and he had told me where it was found, and that it was a type of pliosaur, carpal bone, as he called it, etc. And it was very intriguing because, the thing is about the size of your palm, in terms of diameter and similar thickness, etc. And it's like this big knuckle bone. But if you think about it, it looks like a small bone. So I started investigating it, trying to figure it out. I spoke to a few paleontologists, including Valentine Fisher, who was a big help in terms of helping me narrow things down, et cetera, and Paul de La Salle from the UK, great guy. And so I eventually realized that based on the time period that it was from, the only big pliosaur that is known to exist, so the presumption is that that's what it was, because there's very little complete fossil material on this thing, is a type of Kronosaurus species, either Queenslandicus or the other one. And there's a Colombian version also, Boyacensis, sorry. So the question was, but these animals aren't known from that region. You know, they're known from New Zealand, Australia, that type of stuff, and I think they found and the ones in Colombia, but nowhere near, you know, Russia or anything like that. But there was, like, you know, an inland sea there, et cetera. And so I narrowed it down and realized that it was one of these tiny paddle bones they have in their flippers. You know, they had all these, like, phalanges and hyperphalanges. So there's long, giant flippers that could be 10 feet long, where had dozens and dozens of these little bones extending out to form these flexible flippers they swam with. And this is one of those bones. So I was able to do some number crunching with it based on diagrams and all this other stuff, and figure out that it apparently was a type of Kronosaurus, and not an older one, but still big. And it was the size of, let's say, the purported maximum size for the species, somewhere around like a 36-foot animal, maybe 13 plus tons, something like that. But, you know, apparently that they did live in that area and ruled those Cretaceous oceans at that time period. So it's nice that you get a discovery like that, because you can say that, you know, I just proved that Kronosaurus's range was greater than previously known. It actually also lived in Russia as well as these other parts of the planet. So the animal was probably much more cosmopolitan, is the term. You know, it was all over the place.
Yep.
So.
Okay, that's interesting. So basically, a lot of the aquatic dinosaurs found, you know, in Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, and, you know, like the Russia example. Yeah, that's just pretty calm. You would probably find many examples of those types of dinosaurs all around the world.
Oh, yeah, mosasaur fossils
Okay.
are, I mean, in North America, there's a lot of them in different areas. You know, treasure troves of them. I mean, I have some mosasaur fossils in my collection, some, you know, impressive teeth and things of that nature. I also have a section of mandible, jawbone from a species of mosasaur. My God, my brain shut down for a second. It is, oh my God, are you kidding me? So I told you, they put me on all this medicine, and I'm a little dopey. But it'll come to me in a second. So, Prognathodon is the genus. So this is a large macropredatory mosasaur that lived in the Cretaceous period. And it's interesting because, you know, Mosasaurus hoffmanni is calculated to be the biggest mosasaur. You know, they say different size estimates. It was 45 feet long, it was 50 feet long, different things like that. You know, Prognathodon was maybe a little smaller, et cetera. But it's interesting because the jawbone I have belonged to a pretty large Prognathodon that was probably about 40 feet long, you know, fleshed out, everything. And this jawbone has been broken off the face of its original owner.
Wow.
It's like a 3-foot section of it. And it has tooth punctures on it. Boom, 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 boom. And these are the tooth punctures from a much larger mosasaur. And, you know, this is not imagination or anything like that. I mean, these are legitimate tooth punctures in a pattern, et cetera, that show that what happened. So this and they're not healed, which means that the attacker killed and possibly fed upon this 40-foot mosasaur. But it was a lot bigger. And conservatively, I'm saying that it was 70 feet long. Now, that's a big mosasaur. I mean, compared to the Carnival cruise monster, it doesn't sound big, you know, but this is basically fossil proof that suggests that, you know, Prognathodon may have, in effect, been the biggest of all mosasaurs and aggressively preyed on other mosasaurs, including other specimens of its kind. I mean, maybe it's a territorial dispute, you know, mating thing, who knows what. But, you know, the you got to see the distance between the punctures too. And the head, just the skull of the attacking mosasaur had to be 9 feet long.
Amazing. And where are you're just talking about your fossil collection? Where are you finding, or how are you building your fossil collection? Are you finding some on your own?
Oh, I don't have time to do that anymore. I just know so many, top quality dealers that I work with and stuff, and haggle with, et cetera, and all that. And you want to get the good stuff. You don't want to. I mean, I don't have time. I have invitations to fly over to the UK and hunt the Jurassic Coast with some of the great guys over there, and I would love to do that. Honestly, like Paul de La Salle and stuff. I mean, the Etches Collection Museum over there is founded by Dr. Steve Etches, a paleontologist, who spent, his whole life, he collected on his own as a fossil collector thousands and thousands of specimens that they formed an actual museum based on his collection called the Etches Collection of Jurassic Marine Life. And I get out there to Dorset. I mean, that'll be one of my first stops and all that. But there's some great people out there that really contribute to paleontology with their discoveries. And you don't have to, be somebody who's cooped up in a museum all day or sitting on your fossil collections and the museum's fossils like Smog on his treasure. Oh, nobody else can have anything. Not one coin. Not one trilobite. It shouldn't be like that. The general populace is really good at, in my opinion, at getting stuff, but also in sharing it. If I have like a unique fossil in my collection, like that Kronosaurus, carpal bone, for example, I explore it. I put it out there. I'm not hiding it under a bushel or anything like that. I want to share the knowledge. That's why, like, when I developed the theory of how plesiosaurs swam, like the Loch Ness monster types, the long necks and the 4 flippers, et cetera, I put it out there, and then we actually did a formal paper on it last year that was put out, with full animation to show anatomically how these creatures swam, used their flippers together, all this other stuff. And, I'm not trying to brag, but, compared to a lot of stuff out there, my theory appears to be spot on, the only one that makes actual sense, anatomically, physiologically, the whole enchilada. So, yay!
Probably most people are interested in the T-Rexes and the terrestrial dinosaurs. What drew you to the marine type dinosaurs and the interest in the sea?
From my books, you mean?
Oh no,
my novels,
just personally. What
well, I have stuff
it's a
in my
little
collection.
different looking.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just saying, probably most people would have more of an interest in the T-Rexes running around in the jungle, and you're going for the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and that kind of stuff. What drew you to the ocean instead of the land?
I got you.
Dinosaurs?
Well, the first thing is that the fossils that I've collected are extremely varied. I have everything from, a cave bear skull to a 500-million-year-old trilobite to, a collection of shark teeth spanning the evolution that led up to, Cercaricles megalodon. I've got the cranium from an Irish elk. I've got scutes from giant prehistoric crocodiles. I've got stone tools made by primitive man, some of which go back 800,000 years, pebble tools, et cetera. Ammonites. I've got everything. Prehistoric elephant teeth. You name it, I've got it. So the marine stuff, tends to be a little more out there because of the fact that that's, what I do for a living. I write novels about extinct marine predators. Well, I'm slurring my words, but being, on the loose, kind of Jaws meets Jurassic Park type thing, et cetera. That's like what I do for a living. But if you ask me what I'm drawn to in terms of writing, I think that's a combination of me growing up when I was a kid. My dad was a passionate rock hound. I don't know if you know what a rock hound is.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's a person who amateur who studies geology, and paleontology, et cetera, collects things, that type of stuff. So as a child, I was exposed to things all the time. My dad would, I remember as a kid being 5 years old, and he had like the bones of a mammoth sitting on top of our piano. They're enormous. I mean, as a kid, you think they're, as big as like, the house. But, he was always doing, wheeling, dealing, trading, selling, all this other stuff. He still doesn't know when I was around 14 or 13, I stole one of his megalodon teeth and I took it to the Cabinet of Sciences trading post and I traded it for something I gave to my mom as a Mother's Day present. But I got a deal. But anyway, so the point is that, I had that growing up, and I had the prehistoric scenes model kits and, watched all the movies and, the Ray Harryhausen and stuff, et cetera. But as I also had a passion for fishing, and it's kind of like fishing is like the Forrest Gump thing. When you put your line in there, you never know what you're going to get, and I've hooked some insane, impossible, and strange things, during my hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, days on the water. So, you add the mystery of the deep with a love for prehistoric life, and it just kind of seems to go hand in hand.
Okay, yeah.
Well, the water is very terrifying, I mean, think about it. Yeah. Human beings, we're the dominant species on this planet, but that's basically because of technology. If you take us and you put us without firearms, et cetera, on the plains of the Serengeti, we're not going to last very long, or the woods of Canada, and in the water it's even worse. We're slow on the ground. You put us in the water, how fast is the fastest human swimmer in the world? 3 miles an hour? I don't know. It's not very fast, though.
Yep. Right.
So, everything out there, can run rings around you. So you're in this environment where you're like a manatee, but worse. The manatees are much faster, The only advantage is you're not as blubbery and juicy, so maybe you're not as desirable. But, you put yourself in this environment, you're in the water, you really can't see far, if at all, down there. It's murky, it's dark, you could drown, you're super slow. Maybe you're on the surface, something passing by, you feel a pressure wave, something big. Oh, my God, something touched my foot. It's terrifying. And then when you put into the fact you take somebody who can spin a good yarn, like yours truly, and you have something really big and menacing and dangerous creeping around under you, et cetera, and then you can even put yourself in the predator's perspective and what it sees, you can really, it's a frightening situation. You don't want to be there. It's better, but you can read about it. It's better when you can read about it. Safer.
Well, there's, on your gallery page.
The Paleo Gallery?
Yes.
Which, by the way, I've been so slacking on. I'm such a loser. Oh, my God.
There's one. Well, scroll by at the top. It was it was kind of like a greenish-looking shark, and it had like a squid.
Let me go on there and see what it is you're talking about.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, I see what it is right there. Is it like a nighttime shot, so to speak?
Yes, and that was what you were just talking about, where you really can't see what's coming at you. Like that animal does look like it exemplifies what you're just discussing. You only see part of it. It's a nighttime painting that one of your friends did. You only see kind of like the face. it's a really haunting image of just catching part of what's beneath the surface. I'm sure
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, it's an eerie and realistic kind of look at things. Yeah, I mean, people who swum with coelacanths, it's sort of a similar thing because they have that almost like that glowing eye looking at you, et cetera, and they're kind of like suspended in the dark or half in the dark and stuff, or in the light of the the video camera that's filming them. Yeah, it's a murky, creepy, and very beautiful and very terrifying world down there. That's why like when people talk about like sperm whales and how they dive down thousands and thousands of feet. I mean, to me, again, maybe they're functioning on pure instinct, even though these are intelligent animals, but to me, they got to be the bravest thing on the planet. Because, think about it. Yeah, okay, you're a big whale. You might be 50, 60 feet long, weigh some similar tons, et cetera, but you're not indestructible. You're holding your breath. So if you screw up, you're going to drown to begin with. You're swimming thousands of feet down with pressure that can crush a nuclear submarine. So you're getting squeezed. Your lungs are compressing, your rib cage is collapsing. They're designed to do that, but that's what's happening. And while this is going on and you're holding your breath, it's pitch black down there. There's no light once you get past the phototropic zone, okay? And so they're using sonar to see, holding your breath, getting squeezed, crushing pressure. It's freezing down there, and it's pitch black. And you're down there hunting for squid that are big enough to eat a person. That's what you're doing to earn your
right.
bread and butter. I mean, that takes a lot of goulions, as they say, And there are reports of squid that actually feed on sperm whales, anecdotal reports. So, maybe sometimes you go down there and dinner turns out to be you. It takes a pretty brazen animal to go down by yourself, doing all that stuff, risking your life over and over again for a meal. To me, at least. I wouldn't want to do it.
Okay, and speaking of, you just happened to mention the squids going out after a whale. There's that famous 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea movie scene. I think it's in the book too, with the squid attack on the Nautilus. But we heard about the whale attacking the Essex and sinking it. What did it was Jules Verne basing that incident on something that he observed, reports? Could that really happen? Do squids get that nasty and attack submarines?
There are documented incidents of squid attacking ships, even ships that were much, much too big for them to possibly cause any harm to, et cetera. So, that has definitely happened, eyewitness reports, et cetera. There are incidents where, I'm not sure about submarines. I know I read oh my God. I read one report where a sonar operator on a nuclear submarine, and I don't remember the depth or anything like that or any of the details beyond this, but he said that he had a biologic, a verifiable sonar contact inbound that was about 100 feet long coming toward them at high speed. It sensed the submarine when they hit it with active sonar. It turned around and it took off at a speed that he estimated it was like 60 miles an hour. So to me, that sounds like a gigantic squid that, without the long tentacles, like squid have 8 arms, the shorter arms, you picture, and then they have these feeding tentacles that are kind of concealed inside that shoot out, and it can be much longer. But without the long tentacles, you're talking about a 100-foot squid. That's a gigantic animal. And it comes at this submarine. It detects the submarine, which is much bigger than it, of course, and it then realizes the submarine is a potential threat, maybe, and thinks of it as a gigantic sperm whale or something like that, because of the sonar and the shape, and it flees. it would make sense. But to jet backward, they're able to do that. They have jet propulsion. They can, like an octopus.
Mm-hmm.
They use water through their siphon, and they, squeeze it out from their mantle through the siphon, and they take off. So the speed, the size, that implies a very large, very, very large squid deep down. There was one naval vessel, and this is documented. You can Google it easily. It's the Uss Stein. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not just pulling this over the top of my head, it was a Knox-class destroyer escort ship. And it left out of its harbor, and shortly after leaving harbor, its sonar went, inoperational. It stopped working, and they had to return to base for repairs. The ship needs its sonar. It's a military vessel. It needs to be able to see what's down there, what's coming at it. Is there a threat, a submarine, a torpedo, other ships, whatever. Icebergs, a submerged reef, whatever. They're blind out there otherwise. Mm-hmm. And the sonar dome is at the front of the ship. And the sonar dome is where the hull cuts through the water as the ship's pushing through the water, and it's submerged. It's like this big bulb. Looks like a dome. Oh, that's what they call it, a sonar dome. And, from the pictures I've seen, the sonar dome is probably about, I'm going to say 15 feet across, something like that, on a guess. Well, it was damaged. It was covered with a protective no-foul rubber coating, and they found claws from a gigantic squid embedded in the coating. The squid they must have passed over it. It probably interpreted the Stein as a large sperm whale attacking it. And, the dome, probably the bulbous shape sort of looked like a sperm whale's head to begin with, and it attacked the Stein. It lashed out and it tore into it, et cetera, and it damaged the sonar, so they went inoperational. It ripped itself free when it realized it wasn't a whale or it was something much bigger than it anticipated. It fled, and it left a bunch of the teeth that line the edges of their suckers. Like their suckers have tiny teeth that go around it, and they don't just attach like an octopus's, which are like the suction cups on the toy darts you used as a kid,
Right, yeah.
I've had those on me firsthand, by the way. Octopuses are very hard to get off. But squid are worse because each of those suckers is lined with little teeth that cuts into you. They can actually tear into your flesh and even maybe excise a piece. So this thing, squid have these tiny teeth that go around on their suckers. Well, the teeth that they pulled out of there were 5 times larger than any known squid species, including Architeuthis. And they have these teeth. So some enormous squid attacked a destroyer escort ship, damaged its sonar, and then got out of Dodge. So it happens, There are things out there, and sometimes we're better off not knowing them, seeing them, etc. But
this is some fascinating information, and
I tell jokes too, by the way, if you need it. Just kidding.
Okay. So, do you know when you're going to be starting your show so we can actually see you as a serious
personality?
Dinosaur researcher and comedian.
What was that dinosaur joke I came up with that they had a meme out of? It wasn't the Stegosaurus one. You know what a Stegosaurus is?
Yeah, that's an upcoming question too. But yeah, I know what it is.
They have those big triangular plates that stick up out of their backs, like a series of them, et cetera, and all that. Mm-hmm. So that's why its name actually means plated lizard, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so I had this meme. It has the standard meme that they use of a dinosaur standing up there doing stand-up comedy and stuff, and he tells a joke and he's laughing and it falls flat. So it says and I invented this. I'm taking full credit. It says something like, why was the Stegosaurus thrown out of the buffet? Because he brought his own plates. Get it? Or why was he banned from the buffet? Because he brought his own plates? The plates on his back. Never mind. Wow, it was a tough crowd. My God. See, this is why I don't do stand-up comedy. But, we're looking to get my show finally started. I'm sorry. It's just been so much stuff, and it's not even the pandemic. I'm just so inundated, finishing a novel, getting that out there, doing pre-publicity for it, publicity for it, starting the next project, the blogs. I mean, that Spinosaurus piece that you're talking about, that took me 2 days to do. A lot of research and work and writing involved and all this stuff. And there's only so many hours in the day. I'm a dad. I got these 2 giant cats walking around, running my life. Don't even get me started on being married. I mean, it's like, one thing after another. So I want to get the show out there. I don't know if we're going to do one a month or every 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. But, I think it's going to be great because we're going to be able to bring some great people out there. We're going to be able to talk about some really interesting topics, not just paleontology, but cryptids, cryptozoologies, sightings, theories I have on past sightings, stuff that goes back a long time, anecdotal things, et cetera. We'll be able to cover a lot of interesting topics and, really get people involved in it, So I'm looking forward to it. But I'm hoping, actually, maybe by month's end, that would be great if we could finally get this thing off the ground.
Yeah, I find it a fascinating subject. And I think when, we've done our Mothman shows. We had Joe Taylor as a guest. People really liked his look at so many North American dinosaurs from Texas. And I just think the popularity of Jurassic Park over the last 20 years or so that it's been, probably longer than that. There's a market for it. People are interested in it. We want to wish you best of luck on that. It really is a captivating subject, and one of the Stegosaurus comment I was going to I had in my notes was, Ancient Aliens has that, a little episode of like the foundation of was it Angkor Wat that has a carving of a Stegosaurus. My friend Bruce Cunningham verified that it's there. He's toward the this 1,000-year-old temple. So this massive church complex was built about 1,000 years ago, and there's a really accurate depiction of a Stegosaurus. Just say eye level. Were they walking around the jungles of where it was like Cambodia up until fairly recently?
Well, I mean, so you're saying, could something like this still be alive, based on?
Did the artist see a Stegosaurus walking around about 1,000 A.D. when the temple was built?
This is in Cambodia, as you said?
It's like it's like Cambodia, Vietnam, like that southeastern Asia. I forget exactly where. I think it's on the side of Angkor Wat, wherever that's located. There's probably people in the audience yelling, "Hey, Mark, it's in this country." I may have the wrong country, but I think it's Angkor Wat is the temple. But,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just.
Scott Martis, when he had me on the show talking about Spinosaurus, he had brought up the possibility, and he had mentioned sightings of something, and I think it might have been in the Congo or something, and it wasn't Mokele Mbembe, but he didn't mention about a temple, but he said sightings and drawings and stuff like that of something that looked like an aquatic Stegosaurus. He had been mentioning, and he was proposing the question of whether it would be possible that some sort of small relic population of evolved Spinosaurus or Spinosaurid had survived to the present, and perhaps that these sightings were, not necessarily Stegosaurus, which is a terrestrial herbivore, but perhaps an aquatic or primarily aquatic piscivore, or even entirely aquatic now animal like Spinosaurus. And I mean, I don't know enough about the topic to comment on it one way or the other, but I mean, if somebody 1,000 years ago, like you said, sculpted something and it wasn't just, their imagination, like Kukulkan or something, this flying serpent, and they base it on something and there are other sightings, then you have to look at the possibility of, well, what are these people seeing? I could see a Spinosaurus-type animal being interpreted along those lines. You got a lot of stuff sticking up out of your back, et cetera. If you're in the water, that type of thing. But, I'm not well versed enough in it to really, give you details like some of the other stuff I've been rambling about.
Well, yeah. Well, you also get that. It almost sounds like a brontosaurus described in the Book of Job. It doesn't. It's like a smaller version, but that was written 3,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of huge animal is just kind of hanging out along the River Jordan banks?
You have
it's in the Book of Job.
Big crocodiles, obviously. Like a lot of people think that the behemoth the Leviathan is based on sightings of huge crocodiles. Talking about like it's the armored back and things of that nature. Maybe crocodiles bigger than we know today. Who knows? Yeah,
it's like a tail as large as a Lebanon cedar. All right, that's it might be a little bit of hyperbole, but it's obviously a pretty sizable animal. What are cryptids doing in the Bible? It's just interesting, and you get that that little shark eel combination thing that was filmed. I don't know, it was like 15, 20 years ago. Did you ever see that? It was like a small shark, like dinosaur shark, that was caught off the coast of Asia.
Is it the frilled shark you're talking about?
Maybe that's the name of it. It looked like it had a eel-type tail.
Yeah, and it had like a weird sort of face, like almost like a lizard-like set of jaws, where the maxilla and mandible were about the same size, so it didn't have that undershot jaw and stuff. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with them, but I pulled it up right here while you're talking. I know the name and all that, but yeah, it has like sort of like a serpentine-looking body and stuff, and it says it lunges for like a snake, et cetera. So it's unusual for a shark species. But that just goes to show you. It's not a giant animal like the megamouth shark or some of these other ones that they found, but it does show you that there are adaptations to even sharks that we're not really familiar with. So,
right. It's really a fascinating study, and I think you made us very much aware of. A lot more of these, cryptids, possibly surviving dinosaurs in today's oceans. It's been a really fun discussion, and there's also had in my notes, Barbara just reminded me about. Göbekli Tepe also had. On some of the carvings there were some animals that are now extinct.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that. I was just going to throw that out there. There's like a dodo bird or something.
Which we're talking about from North America, like megafauna?
No. They're the Göbekli Tepe site in Turkey, and on the pillar, like there were all these T-shaped pillars that were buried, and some of them have some animals that actually look like they were extinct, but they were alive about 11,000 years ago when they were carved onto the pillars.
Well, I'd love to see information about that. I know that, for example, like the mammoth, the last mammoths only went extinct like around 4,000 years ago. There were isolated populations of them, like off Siberia and stuff like that. So, I mean, some prehistoric mammalian life has been around a lot more recently than people think. 10,000 years is, in the bigger scheme of things, with time, with evolution, is just like a grain of sand. 10,000, 12,000 years ago on this continent, we had lions the size of cows practically, and Columbian mammoths that were bigger than African elephants, and a giant short-faced bear, and you name it. It was like an outdoor life dream or something if you worked for Outdoor Life magazine. But can you imagine? I got chased by this Irish elk, and I was up a tree, and then this saber-toothed cat came up, and then I was running from that, and then there was this gleeptodont, that thing with the big shell and the spiked tail on the end. It looks like an ankylosaurus. He tried to get me, and then and everywhere you turn, there's something else. An endless parade of gigantic creatures. Like, hi, how you doing? What's going on? Hey, But we live in exciting times, but I'm sure they were more exciting, a few millennia back.
You're making me have flashbacks of idolizing Chaka and being chased by the slee stacks on Land
I
of
have the entire series on DVD, by the way. Marshall, Will, and Holly. Oh, wait, I'll get in trouble to do that. Never mind. Okay. On a routine
that might be copyrighted.
It is, probably. I'll be in so much trouble. Yeah, I used to, when I was a kid, I loved that show.
No, it was a good one. I enjoyed Saturday mornings to see Land of the Lost and West Wind.
I was big with the show Space Giants, which was like this sort of like kaiju type series from Japan. Had this like family. Goldar, Silvar, and Gam, and they were like this family of like robots with antennas coming out of their heads, but they were like people sort of, and they were fighting monsters and all that. And Goldar, he was like this 50-foot tall robot with like long hair and antennas and stuff. And I used to argue with my dad when I was like 5 years old. I'd be like, Goldar's real. Look, he's real. That's not real. It's fake. And I'm like, look. And then you see this giant gold foot like stepping on the human-sized bad guy. So I'm like, see, there's his foot. Right there. He goes, that's paper mache. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Out comes the belt. I have issues. This is a medicine talk. And remember, I told you the doctors gave me a lot of pills. I took 12 pills at dinner time, all right? So I'm not responsible for anything I say right now.
Okay. All right. So, Max, we're down to about the last 90 seconds or so. You want to give out your website or anything else you want
sure.
mention in the last, and then we need a wrap.
No problem, brother. Yeah, listen, what I like to do with readers is, first up, my website has a lot of stuff on there. Like the Paleo Gallery is free advertising for all those artists and stuff. If you go on either maxhawthorne.com or kronosrising.com, Kronos with a K, or on Amazon if you just want to look for the books. But the Kronos Rising series is the books that I write. But if you go on there and you click on the free book links, there's a whole bunch of free excerpts from the different novels that people can go on, try out the stuff, see how they like it. There's audible versions, all sorts of things like that. It lets people get a taste of stuff without really jumping into things, et cetera. But I'm very well reviewed, and people seem to enjoy the books. And new readers are always welcome. There's a monthly newsletter if people want to sign up for it that has sneak peeks into upcoming projects, book excerpts from the new book, and things of that nature. It's good stuff. I always enjoy talking to new people.
Okay, Barbara, just let me know that there's a minute left, so might as well just say goodnight. Thank you so much. We'll be back Thursday night for a special show at 10 o'clock, and we'll see everyone next weekend. Thank you, Barbara, for producing, and thanks, Max, and we'll see you Thursday night.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, guys. Have a great night.